This is Betty Ann Medeiros, and today we're going to learn how to paint in watercolors. This video is for the students who have a little bit of experience with watercolor but now want to take it to the next level. So we're going to paint a beautiful scene of Candlewood Lake, and I'm going to show you how to do the water and the depth of atmospheric perspective, and I'm going to show you how to do the mountains in the background and trees and leaves and shadows, and we're going to have a lot of fun. And we're going to add an American flag on the end. Okay, so I start with a photograph. This photograph is of Candlewood Lake, taken from Candlewood East Marina in Brookfield, Connecticut, and I want the main focal point to be the flag. So what I do is I plan all my elements to be almost like directional arrows towards the flag, as you can see in my sketch. I'm using permanent alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, new gamboge, hooker's green, permanent sap green, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, indigo, cerulean blue, and a paint called May Green, and a little bit of Opera Rose. I only used 4 brushes for this picture. One brush is a rosemary brush, that's my favorite brush, and then I have a Montmartre brush and also my Series 7 Winsor Newton brush, which is black there, and a Creative Mark detail brush. I'm using masking fluid to apply to the American flag area, just so that I can mask off that area while I paint the background. I don't use masking fluid that often, but in this case I'm going to use it. I start with a sketch, and then I'm going to transfer that sketch to 140-pound watercolor paper, usually Arches. Then I'm going to apply masking fluid to the flag and the pole and wait for it to dry. Start with just plain water and painting the sky area with water so that we can use the wet into wet technique when we start to add color to the sky. As you notice, I'm going right over where I have the masking fluid, so I don't have to worry about that. And I'm going kind of around the leaves. So here I'm applying cobalt blue, and I'm just putting some sky in, going around where the leaves are going to be, because I don't want that color to mix with the leaf color. Okay, so now I'm continuing on with the sky, making sure I get all the sky holes in. As you notice, the sky is darker at the top and lighter as you go down towards the horizon. And I left a little cloud behind the flag, which is just clean water. Now I'm going to add some sap green into the grass, and as you notice, it's just a light wash of sap green. So now I'm going to do the water, just a wash of cobalt blue in the water. I'm going to use sap green again in the background trees, and then the ones that are right behind the large tree. And I'm using a little bit less water than I used for the grass, but it is sap green. This will be the first layer. I'm going to be doing several layers on these trees to show texture. Now I'm going to do the hills that are further back. And as I do the hills that are further back, they are going to have a little bit more blue in them. That's why I didn't mind doing the sky over the whole mountain, because it's going to have a little bit of blue in it anyway to show atmospheric perspective. So as you can see, I can use my paper towel just to dab up some of the bleeding paint, so it can be used almost like an eraser. Now I'm mixing indigo and hooker's green together, and I am going to start working on the leaves. They are in the shade, so they are bluer and darker. So that's why I'm adding the indigo in with the hooker's green. And as you can see, I'm just doing a dabbing brush stroke, and the dabbing brush stroke is uneven, not symmetrical. Sometimes I go up, sometimes I go down, and it just gives a more natural look. And the load of water and paint is pretty heavy, so it's not just only paint, it's got a lot of water in it too, so it puddles up.
Freude, Tochter aus